Indian pharma is at $41 billion in size, T30. And the overall pharma industry worldwide is over $1 trillion. And India is called the pharmacy of the world because 40% of generics in the US is from India and 25% UK. 60% of the vaccine produced in the world is from India. And we have been evolving constantly from our APIs to generics to branded generics, biosimilars, and now I was very glad to hear that we have patented a biologic as well, and we are going to market it. So we have been evolving through the value chain, and innovation is very much part of our journey. Now today we are going to double-click more on the innovation side of things, and when it comes to innovation, what comes up in our mind when we put innovation and pharma together is all about developing new drugs and new treatments, therapeutics, and stuff like that. But in a country like India, innovation is not just about introducing new medicines, and it's also equally about how do we distribute, how do we take it to the markets, how do we make it affordable? Because affordability is one of the key dimensions in India. If somebody spends certain billions of dollars to send a rocket to the moon, we do it in 1/10 of the cost. So, that's been our track record. That's been our tradition. So affordable innovation is another key thing. So we're going to explore these aspects. I'm joined by eminent, pharma experts, the industry leaders who are at the intersection of both digital and pharma. So we're going to have an exciting discussion. So let me kick this off with a question, more generic question about what are all the innovations we are seeing in pharma? What are the areas other than drug development and research? Let me ask this question, pose this to Ganesh. So what are the areas that we see that there are innovations happening right away?
Thanks for the question, Ganesan, and thanks, CT, for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. There's multiple areas. I think across the value chain, you see innovations that are happening. During the COVID times, I think one of the maximum areas that we saw innovation on was in the front office. Whether it was the way in which you engaged with doctors, which was necessitated because you couldn't have your reps going and meeting them. So whether it was ways to get across to doctors virtually, getting doctors to able to connect with their patients in a virtual manner, I think we saw a lot of new things coming up over there. Along with it also was the way in which you engage with your channel partners, your distribution chains. So the ability to kind of see what was happening in terms of your track and trace, looking at whether you had the right quality reaching the end consumer. There's been multiple technologies that have been used for it as well. Underlying all of these has, of course, been a whole bunch of analytics that has been coming through for all the parts, whether it is for the sales team, for the manufacturing teams, for making sure that you had an integrated chain that kind of came across all the way from your forecast going all the way back to not just your manufacturing, but procurement and beyond. So I think that was something that you've seen a lot more. The place where I think innovation has helped a lot more is also not just within the organization, but also cutting across the value chain, which is your partners on one side, whether it's for research and development, whether it is the suppliers, whether it is distribution partners, legal parts, regulatory areas. There's been multiple parts which have got exposed to the systems. And the last part which I'll leave with, and I'm sure other panelists will be able to add a lot more, is on areas around security. I think there's been a lot of currency which is gained on security. Innovative ways to see that how can you ensure that you are secure. And pharma as a sector has been exposed, I think after financial services, pharma has probably been the most hit. Yeah. So that's one area which has gained a lot, and a lot of things to kind of figure out how can I make sure that things are more secure, and innovations around that to check for frauds, to check for ways by which you're integrated, taking through. These have been some of the things that we've seen gaining a lot of stuff. The last area which I'd like to leave with is on blockchain. Where again we've seen ones, especially with contract research organizations, how could one have a better level of quality control coming through from there, has been an area that we've seen.
Okay. So that's a lot of different areas. I'm going to leave out security out of this because there is a separate panel discussion on it, and we will let them explore the topic in detail, but security is also equally important. But across the value chain, there are opportunities to innovate. So let me start with the first leg of the value chain. Let me take this question to Phani. So where are you seeing innovations happening in the drug development area? I mean, where is Indian pharma in this in this journey of introducing new molecules, new biologics, biosimilars. So if you could throw some light about our achievements so far and what we are about to see in this space, Phani.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Ganesh and ET. It's an interesting question because yesterday we celebrated Dr. Anji Reddy's Memorial Day in Dr. Reddy's, and a bunch of our conversations actually were around primarily drug development and part of his unfinished dream and so on. So it's a very important construct, and the previous panel touched upon it briefly, not just for pharma, but when I look at any industry, innovation or the new trends usually happen when three things come together. One is the market need, the second is the risk capital that needs to go with it, and the third one is ecosystems that need to actually run this through. I think Indian pharma is the first one in terms of market need, and the compulsions from the organization's perspective is the price erosion in the generic markets. There is a bunch of things that are obviously forcing the companies to rethink what the definition of innovation is and what the contours of innovation is. So that's the first checkbox that's getting ticked off. And the second one is about the risk capital. And I think that is probably a place that India still needs to do better, while the companies obviously are ramping up the R&D funding there. But I think the risk capital part of what Vikas mentioned, the VCs and the elements in private equity and the money that flows in, I think that is still a little underdeveloped. But the ecosystems part, I think Sanjay talked about it in the previous panel, very, very important, but it's coming up as well. So I think purely it's about the right frame that is falling in place, and no small thanks to even the government's own thinking in terms of how do you kind of kickstart this. So I think we are at the right juncture. Did we make a lot of progress? I think compared to the road that we have to travel, not much, because what we have moved from is, if I can take the example of an IT industry, primarily we were a services IT industry kind of country, right, in the past, and people were asking where are the products. It's almost very similar when it comes to Indian pharma. We started off with generic pharma, we started off with APIs actually, and then with generic pharma, and now we see companies now getting into differentiated formulations, specialty formulations, and so on. So there is a curve that we have moved in specific areas of specific therapy areas, but when it comes to NCEs and NBEs, I think that's a place that we probably have a distance to cover. I think the three elements that I talked about essentially still have to fall in place for that later part of the spectrum. Primarily risk capital, as I see it now, is the major concern, and the invisible fourth pillar is the talent pool available in the country to actually work on this. Even if we have all the ecosystems in place, all the companies wanting to do the right thing, I think the kind of talent that we need to actually work on some of this is still something that the country needs. So we did make some progress. I mean, particularly for us, I can talk about spaces like oncology, where we're actively working with CAR-T, startups and in and outside India as well. Sun has done a great job in some parts of specialty pharma. So I think as an industry, I think we are moving the needle. But I personally think it's about the right time. It's starting to get exciting. I don't think we are anywhere close to reached anywhere close to the destination yet.
But I guess there are some molecules in pipeline across the companies.
Yes, there are a bunch of molecules. I think the technical details of it probably is too boring for the audience. But in that sense, in the spaces of autoimmune diseases, in the areas of dermatology, in the areas of oncology and some of the rare diseases, there are particular molecules. And one of the more interesting things is India is probably one of those markets which is seen, or the companies in Indian pharma are seen as good partners. So when we go out and talk to partners across the world, there is a lot more openness to partner with us to take some of these new molecules to the market. So I think between partnerships and our own investments, there is a quite a bit of distance that we have moved already, and I see that.
And the R&D spend has gone up substantially over the years. It stands at 7.5% of the revenue across the Indian pharma industry. But it's got a lot to catch up, isn't it, to the global benchmark of 13-14%.
Yeah, I think the mix of R&D spend is most important than the absolute numbers or the percentage of sales. Primarily because, like I mentioned, a lot of R&D spend was going into the generics, but the spends shoot up because, and there is a Pareto in it as well. When you actually dig deeper into the actual R&D spend, there is a Pareto in there. Some of the more complex molecules, some of the more differentiated formulations, and the biosimilars, etc., essentially require us to actually put a lot more R&D funds, away for it. So there is a little bit of devil in the detail in terms of where the Pareto is shaping, but I think it's the right curve, like I was saying, because it's not just the absolute spend that needs to go up, because there is some part of the value chain that needs efficiency. That means if you are a generic player, because of the price erosion, you really don't want that part of the R&D spend to shoot up significantly, because the market can't afford it. But is it being redirected to the right spaces is how we evaluate it internally, and I'm seeing pretty interesting switches even within our own organization as well as our friends around.
Very, very interesting perspective, Phani. The next part of, Indian pharma has always been known for manufacturing, right? So its manufacturing and distribution is at the heart of the pharma industry. So let me take this question to Sreeji to understand, what are the innovations happening in the manufacturing side? We have heard about this IoT and blockchain and various other technologies disrupting the space. But what are you seeing that's being practiced currently?
Yeah, thanks Ganeshan for the question. Good afternoon, everyone. Essentially, if you look at pharma, we keep hearing that we've been laggards as far as technology is concerned and innovation in technology is concerned, which could contribute to the manufacturing or the supply chain or the other front-end value chain as well. That has changed. There has been leaps taken by, I think, almost all the pharma companies, where the power that technology can bring to any part of this value chain is sort of understood. And there are board-level discussion, leadership management team discussions that happen on what can we do, what should we do, what should we experiment with. That's the good news. Now, the work that is happening in this space, especially in manufacturing, is around understanding, how do we improve the efficiency of the manufacturing lines? How do we reduce the cost of delivering the batches? How do we, create efficiencies around other adjacency costs like utility, for example? When you have an API plant, if you look at the P&L of an API plant, you will see the utility cost is a very, very high component in there. Now, even if you make a couple of percentage impact on that, the absolute value impact is going to be very high. So now, if I now come as a CIO, if I come to the next level of detail in this, how do I make it happen? The first thing is the data sources. So I have to say that, a lot of it was not digitized. So the first part of this journey is the fundamentals. How do you digitize this? It could be sometimes NLP-based paper data conversion into electronic format. It could be in other cases implementing systems like EBMRs or LIMS or chromatography systems, for example. It could be in other cases, supplementing that with IoT sensors or even create an industrial IoT platform where you can bring all of that data and then normalize the data, which then can be used for use case driven modeling and algorithm creation. So that's the work that is happening, which is very, very interesting space. And I would say there are some early results, and just like we heard from Phani, this is, in that curve, if you look, we are somewhere there. We have not, really taken off. But there are early results. We have already seen impact in the yield results in certain cases, in the utility cost in other cases, in creating digital performance management with a combination of industrial IoT platform and the data lake, where you run algorithms near the edge and take action then and there, instead of somebody going and taking a sample or the data lake doing a post-facto analysis the next day, right? So the idea here is, how do you save that batch today? Right. Okay. If I do it tomorrow, the batch is already processed, and you probably, if there is an issue, you probably end up losing the batch, which is crores of money down the drain. Yeah. So that's the kind of work that we are doing there. It's very, very interesting.
So IoT and at the edge, and IoT and analytics converging at the edge, and implementing the right sort of interventions to save the batch. So fantastic. Compliance and is another important area. You know, let me move back to the clinical trials part of it. You know, when you develop a drug, there is a lot of clinical trials and other, which is a part of the research that you need to do. There is a decentralized trials that are happening, connected clinical trials. And there is a lot of disruption happening there as well. And there is a lot of application for data analytics, AI over there. So there is something called Molecule Net, which has got the database of various molecules which you can use. Incidentally, what I read is the way the protein binds to a certain molecule is based on the shape compatibility. So you are able to model which molecule will bind with which protein, and based on that shortlist from millions of candidates to a few candidates. So I believe there are some lot of innovations happening there. So if I may take this question to Phani, back to you again. Do you see the greater adoption of data analytics AI in the research trials side of things?
Absolutely. I think from a pharma industry perspective, we have been collecting too much data and using too little of it for a long time. I think so. Even in manufacturing, we say that we manufacture more paper than pills. So I think all the jokes apart, I think particularly from R&D perspective, when you look at it, some of our company like ours, for instance, we've invested into digitalizing some of our core R&D operations over a period of time. So that element of data availability is now a little bit more sorted. But the objective is to actually drive analytics on top of that. So there, actually, we do it in, the way most of the companies are actually approaching this is in 3 levels, right? One is, how do I extend what work I already do with some of the machines, So for example, a lot of use cases for us are on top of our image analytics work, So that means, let's say you have an NIR or some form of imaging, happening in the lab. How can I now extend that and complement the scientist with more AI? So when it comes to complex liposomal products, etc., we have an AI engine that kind of allows us to, reduce the amount of work that a scientist has to do manually. In the times when, 5-7 years back, when I came into Dr. Reddy's, it's a piece of paper that people actually, a good scientist would be able to actually say whether it is, matching the right RLD or not, and so on. And that part of it is now completely AI-driven. So that is a piece of work that, particularly in terms of molecule characterization, in terms of API, excipient compatibilities and places like that, where a lot of scientific data that is available open source, as well as our own experience running these experiments over a long period of time, comes together to help the scientists better. So that's broadly what we internally call as smart formulations, but that's a big jump where AI is augmenting what a scientist is capable of. The second big block is what we can do when it comes to bioavailability. I'm just still taking like a very generic product. How do you take a product from a pilot bio to a pivotal bio and so on? How many, and these are obviously the costlier parts of the value chain from an R&D perspective. How much of it can be done in silico, right? So it is obviously both helpful from a efficiency perspective, but is also more effective because you can now run multiple iterations of it before you want to, reach where you want to reach. So that is a second level where it also helps you reduce the amount of, bio tests that you will have to go do on patients and the logistics associated with it and so on. So there is a little bit of that innovation where AI helps you do the drug development faster. And the third big block is how the R&D integrates with what happens in manufacturing. A lot of times the R&D folks get called when a product fails or a product has robustness issues in the manufacturing. Then the R&D folks actually go and troubleshoot it. Now imagine the unified data lake for us allows the manufacturing teams and the R&D teams to actually look at the same set of data. How did it behave in the lab and now how is it behaving in the manufacturing plant? And that layer of work allows you a lot of flexibility when it comes to commercial success, commercial competitiveness, because you want to keep the product robust for a long period of time, and out of stock is a big deal, and so on and so forth. So in 3 different levels of how do you enhance what the scientist is doing, The second one is in terms of how do you improve the drug development cycle by kind of inducing AI into the overall process. And the third part is how do you kind of use the data and AI for integrating with these internal/external partners. You know, manufacturing is our internal partner, but you can now extend it to more external partnerships as we kind of source more and more products from outside or do parts of R&D outside our organizations and so on. So as a construct, you know, the people who actually invest early into some of these might not see it as an ROI at the initial parts of it, but the long-term benefits of this and the competitive advantage, I certainly think will play out over the next 5 to 10 years as we move to more complex and products and partnerships and ecosystems.
So there is already a lot of use of data and AI in the trials and research, and partnerships are absolutely key. And you know, so you are working with a lot of technology providers. And
yes. But my comment on the first thing holds. The journey is long. You know, the night is still young. I think we still have a long distance to go.
There's one thing that Indian pharma companies are very sensitive to is the FDA audits. You know, whenever somebody comes to the door, right, you can see that fluctuation in the pharma stocks, right? And you know, we are still under the lens of you know, those reviews and audits and other things. So where is technology helping? Let me take this question to Sreeji in terms of where is technology helping us in terms of improving our compliance posture?
I mean, we are still under the lens, and rightly so, right? I mean, we are you know, touching people's lives. We help you know, deal with the care that is needed for the patient. So that lens is never going to disappear, right? It's always going to be there. You know, in the past, it was all about you know, doing it a certain way. And you know, if you are not following that, then it is an issue. What I can say now is even the regulators, they want to adopt technology to change the way we do things. Okay. And using technology and the processes and procedures, we define how certain processes in the manufacturing line or in a lab or in a warehouse, in a storage area, etc., will be done. And then constantly look at how do you improve that. So if you look at the complexity that we deal with, it is about the validation effort and keeping that validated, you know, whether there is a new operating system coming, new instrument coming, new machine coming, and if there is a process change, if the line layout is changing, everything needs to be validated and documented, and then we need to strictly follow that. We are now you know, in a phase where the regulators are telling us we need to move from, you know, reactive approach to this to an all-time readiness, and look forward and be in a stage where you can say you are assuring that kind of you know, compliance. So CSV is what we still say, computer system validation, but the CSA and the draft, you know, in terms of how to move from CSV to CSA by the US FDA and other agencies as well, is there. Okay, there is a thought process of just, you know, doing the steps of those detailed steps, which takes 2 months sometimes to complete, to a more proactive technology-driven approach on how do you assure the quality of what we are trying to do. So that's what is happening in the compliance area. But having said that, we are not there. There is still a lot of rigor on a daily basis. There is a lot of work that happens between the IT guys, the engineers, the operations guys, the quality guys, to have that loop maintained using the processes and procedures that we have. There is a certain level of digitization that has happened there, but not so much of automation there yet. I mean, we are now in a phase where we are talking about how do we automate that, and so that, you know, by exception, we can look at what the issues are rather than going through every line item to see, okay, if everything is okay. So can you automate by saying, okay, this is how it should be, this is how the line is performing, whether it is matching or not, is there an exception which is not within the norm range that is established, and if so, then you get the quality guys and the production guys to look at it, and if there is technology help needed, then we go and help there. That's the kind of direction that we are in.
So automation and IoT and you know, the digitalization driving the conversion from CSV to CSA. Okay. So we've seen manufacturing, drug research, trials, and others. I think one important thing is about how are we going to take these medicines to the masses, you know, to the people. So So what's happening there, Sujith, in that space, in terms of making it affordable, take it to the rural masses, and the distribution and reach of the products? So what are pharma companies doing, innovating to get there?
Hi, very good afternoon, and thank you for having us at this esteemed panel. So, what has happened over the last several years and decades, like somebody mentioned earlier in the discussion, Indian pharma was known for its generics. Now, increasingly, there's more innovation happening. There's more launches happening in not just biosimilars, but also new biotherapeutics that are coming out, and CAR T-cell-based therapies that are coming out in the next couple of years. But are they, one, economically suitable for the market? India is a very price-sensitive market. Now, there is one layer that we've been talking about innovation in R&D, we've been talking about innovation in manufacturing, but what about innovation in sales and marketing to the ground level? Because the big tier 1 cities are pretty mature, pretty saturated, well penetrated. You have your established key opinion leaders who are driving sales, who you are interacting with, etc. So, but now the next set of growth that is going to come, where, in my opinion, and where Anervea as an organization is going to focus on, is the rural, semi-urban sectors, where penetration has been typically by small, generic, tier 2, tier 3 players, typically low-price products that have been there. But these markets have evolved. The people on the ground are more aware. They're more tech-savvy. There's much more deeper understanding from different sources that they're trying to understand. But what is the biggest lacking point is, one, there's not enough information about these markets. There's not enough data. Everybody's talking about data analytics. Yes, there's years of data in R&D and other sectors that is currently helping this drive to take up AI. But in sales and marketing, on-the-ground data on what is the socioeconomic factors that are driving it, especially if you're going to price the drug. What is the demographics there? What's the kind of profile? Because typically in a rural market, what do people go down to the doctor for? Because they go to the doctor for fever, cough, cold, main cardiovascular is very limited, but these are areas where they commonly go, right? But the reach is not there. There's no understanding of that. And even at Anervea, what we are trying to do is provide, one, that layer of data at the rural and semi-urban level market data, trying to give pharma companies a perspective of what does the market look like in these markets. The second layer that where we see the innovation going to happen is then redefining their sales force. Because the sales force is essentially currently going for the low-hanging fruit by default. And it's not to blame anybody, but rather because that's how the market works. So this will mean redefining and showing them that there is a huge pot that you're not tapping into. There's a huge pot where analytics comes into place, where companies like us, Anervea, will provide the analytics to show you what is the optimal sales force size that is needed, right? And what could be the potential in the market? How should you target it? So one of the interesting things that happened is common generalization happens in marketing. So coming down to marketing into the rural segment, your same messaging. So somebody said in Darbhanga area, one of the case studies that we worked on was in Darbhanga area, they tried to market in English pamphlets a cholesterol drug that is down there. But after the campaign was done, they felt that there was no uptake. There was no uptake in the sales. So the sales guys went down on the ground, and the doctor is saying, you gave me something in English, which I don't understand. How do I communicate it to the people down there? And our platform actually enables marketing analytics to understand what is the type of messaging in rural and semi-urban markets that'll be the most effective. So innovation has to happen where even when there is lack of data or there is minimal data, there are ways to use data analytics and AI to actually support this. Now, another common thing that I'm based in London, and one other factor that I wanted to highlight is patient engagement. Nobody spoke about it, right? I think India has actually, and multiple companies, esteemed colleagues who we hear from Cipla, Lupin, and others, we've all tried multiple elements in in patient engagement in areas of respiratory, in areas of oncology, etc. I think there has to be a much more greater innovation in those areas as well. Because you need to, what has happened is in Europe and the US, there's a lot of trial and error that has happened. They've failed multiple times. They've dropped billions of dollars over the years. But in India, I've seen a massive shift towards. We are a market which doesn't, the number of cash payments have reduced. We do UPI payments. We use Google Pay. If you go down to Europe, there is no Google Pay. That's the truth. So the amount of digitization you could do here is immense. So with that, I can pass it on to you.
Yeah, so I just see that the time's up. I thought this is going to be for an hour, and I was trying to finish in 45 minutes now. Before we conclude, let me just go around and ask, one top area for innovation, right? Starting with Sreeji, that you think that it's important we can disrupt.
Probably I should try and be cool in this one, right? What is happening is a lot of internal process and external process driven innovation is happening, looking at the value chain aspect. But I think the disruptive mindset, probably is what is needed to leapfrog some of the changes that we need to bring in an India kind of a market. There are a lot of, technology options that is out there. Anervea is talking about, some interesting stuff that they are doing. But I have to mention this, right? The Chat GPT, which is there. But yesterday I was reading an article, Chat GPT will look like a blur, in another couple of years, because there is now GPT coming, which can actually start creating audio and video. So content creation, communication to the right stakeholders in a very effective manner to target and understand what they want and then deliver what is needed. So this kind of technology development that is happening, I think is going to disrupt what exactly that Sujith was talking about in terms of, communicating to the tier 2 or tier 3, or maybe even tier 1, and not just doctors and HCPs, but also the patients and other ecosystem players. This is an area I think there is going to be a lot of disruption that's going to happen.
Great. So cognitive tools to engage with the patients. Ganesh, yours?
So to me, I think it's going to be technologies coming up with new business models that one could look at. From what he was mentioning in terms of saying the rural markets, the right people to have. It's traditionally been that we've just grown by adding people, right? Especially in India, that's been the model that has been looked at. With what's been happening the last couple of years particularly, I think people are realizing there's more that can be done. It's not an easy process because it requires a change both at the patient and the HCP end as well. So it's going to be a gradual process, but I think you're going to see a lot of technologies coming up to redefine the whole business models. Whether you're looking at R&D, where you're talking of biosimilars, cell-based therapies, any of those coming through, whether you're looking at the distribution chain, whether you're looking at storage, the way you're taking it, manufacturing, the way you're looking at it. I think all across you're talking of saying, what is a business model I can change, because we've just been doing this for too long the same way. It just doesn't work any longer.
Okay, innovation is going to be at the level of business model itself. Phani, your pick?
I kind of agree with what both Sujith and Ganesan said, but I just wanted to add that element of innovation will continue to happen around the overall product development and commercialization. It would happen not just from within the organizations, but with a very, very different set of partners who look very different than what we are used to. It can be digital native, patient support platforms or the doctor engagement platforms on the front end, but also with a lot of third-party R&D organizations as we go. So the way we have to look at innovation is in two blocks, right? What is going to change is how we're going to bring innovation together in terms of how products happen. So that's going to be a lot of partnerships, and that is going to be the key. And the second part to that is it's going to be extremely data-driven. And hence, both the partnerships as well as innovation will be very, very data-driven. So with these two trends coming up, I think technology ends up playing a big, big role. I think our adoption of cloud and AI today is very, very rudimentary. Like I would say, it's primarily used. Most of the CIO organizations typically look at it as a server offload than anything else. But when you actually are thinking of product innovation with partnerships, how do you leverage cloud? How do you leverage the the elements like cognitive as a service. And because we can't build everything ourselves, I think these as a combination will probably what will create innovation and
We should
and
probably
disruption.
talk offline for the complex models that we can support you with.
Absolutely,
Sujith, yours?
Sure. Hi. So I think there are multiple. India should be the land of frugal innovation, I would say. And you need data. And one of the key things that I see is where does data going to come from, especially if you're going to use real-world evidence in not just R&D, but also patient engagement, medical affairs, compliance. You need data at the ground, on the ground level. And the way the new clinical trial policies launched by the Indian government, the UPCB, CMP that has been being put in place, you will need data at a ground level from teleclinics, like Anervea has a Tatwan e-clinics, where we have about 600 centers, where we are trying to capture real on-the-ground data for real-world evidence application, and that would be the future in India. And FDA's new clinical trial policy clearly states that you need more diversity in the mix. Women are the most missed lot in any clinical trial. And India has 50% of the population, which is women in diverse backgrounds, cultures, so on and so forth, and economies, because there is what people don't realize, even in cardiac care, there is natural biases which are coming in the way women take medication. So these are things that we should be considering in the future.
Okay, data and analytics still a relevant area, and there is a lot to do. So with that, totally out of time. Great to have all of you in this discussion. Thank you for your time.